that it's in Korean.
I know it's Li.
Yeah.
Wong Li.
No, that's the other guy. This is EE. This is EE, who's better known by his pen name, which is Yorgo. Okay, he's in here. Okay, who else is in here? E Huang, who's known as Taegye Sanseng. When we go to Andong, we're going to be on the other side of Andong from his shrine, and we'll go visit it. And this painting in the back is a painting of the mountains in front of his shrine. We'll go see this, okay?
Wait, what's his name again?
Taegye Sanseng, E Huang.
I remember when I was serving in Fayang, which was by Sejong Daehakyo, they named all their buildings after these people. So I was like, what's Taegye one? And I looked it up.
Yeah. So you met two of the people here. There's Yulgo and Taegye. And these people are such big names that they're not only on the money, but streets are named after them. You know Taegye-do? Taegye-do in Seoul. Do you know Yulgong-no? We just came out Yulgong-no. When we came up from, from the Chongmyo, on Chongdong, came up that side street and turned right and went through that area with a palace on both sides. That's Yulgong-no. That's the street named after Yulgo. Okay. So these are big names. These are important people. When we get down to Gyeongju, I'll tell you about a couple other people for whom streets are named in Seoul. People that go back from the Shilla dynasty and such. But we'll stay focused on just these people for right now, okay? So, inside here, on the outside wall, on the east and the west, there are 9 and 9 of these Confucian scholars. And I've introduced 2 of them to you. And as we go along, I'll introduce probably 4 more. I won't tell you about all of them, but I'll introduce a few more of them to you as we go along, okay? If you want to know about all of them, you can, but I'll just talk about some of them. Now, someone said King Sejong is in here. No. Kings aren't in here. Kings are where? We just came from there. That's the king place over there. So you don't put kings over here. They're different creatures, okay? So they're over there, not over here. And someone said...
But it's the same idea. It's a spiritual shrine.
It's exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same thing, but different categories.
Classes of people.
Yeah. These are scholars, and they're with the scholar. Confucius himself was never a king. In fact, he was a sort of a frustrated king wannabe, I suppose. You know what they say what Confucius's name card looked like? It says Confucius Political Consultant. That's what he did for a living. He went around talking with kings. He lived in the time when China was occupied by a bunch of small kingdoms. And they had a myth that the whole realm had been unified at one point. And that's why China is unified today, because they had this idea that China should be unified. Europe is no more diverse than China. And yet Europe has always been fragmented. And you say, well, it's natural for Europe to be fragmented. You got the Italians, they speak Italian, the French speak French, and the Germans speak German. But the different regions of China speak equally divergent dialects of Chinese. In fact, we call them dialects incorrectly. They are different languages. Do you know the difference between a language and a dialect?
Yes.
What?
Well, there's a different dialect in digital.
Okay. I'll tell you what the difference...
The language is the basis, and the dialect is the... You can hear the basic language within the dialect. It's just there's a few words that are changed here, where along with a couple pronunciations, along with the way the sounds are said.
That's right. I'll give you a shorthand way of understanding between a dialect and a language, okay? A language has an army. Okay? And the significance of this is, look at Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, for example. They speak Scandinavian. That's their language. But we think of them as speaking Norwegian, Danish, and Swedish.
Yeah.
But they are mutually intelligible.
My roommate teaches at the MTC there, and he can teach in all 3 different languages because he understands completely.
They are not different languages, but they are languages because each one has an army and a navy. And then we speak about the dialect of Cantonese. But Cantonese is totally unintelligible to a Mandarin speaker. Totally unintelligible. So it is a language. And yet we talk about it being a dialect because it's part of this Chinese thing. And China is one, you see. And it's one because of this mythology that they wanted to be one, and so they created one.
The Europeans never had that vision.
The Europeans never had that vision. And the Chinese had that vision, and in the time of Confucius, He went around to all these small kingdoms and said, if you want to unite, if we want to get back to where we were, he thought that during the time of the Zhou dynasty was a mythical dynasty before that, but they had this record of the Zhou dynasty. And they said, if you want to be one like we were at the time of the Zhou dynasty, in reality the Zhou dynasty was just one part of the whole, but they thought it was the whole. And so they kept trying to recreate this whole and unite, and finally they did. But it wasn't Confucius that reunited the kingdom, it was Qin Shi Huangdi, the founder of the Qin dynasty. And he did so by military might. There were scholars who argued against Confucius, and they were the militarists. They argued that you don't win by righteousness. Confucius's argument, his whole argument, the whole point of being here, is that Confucius argued that you should rule by righteousness. You should rule by goodness. Mencius, his good disciple, went to one of the kings of the kingdom, one of the kingdoms, and said, look, if you want to control the whole realm, just be righteous. And if you're righteous, the people will crane their necks to you as the sunflowers crane their necks to the sun. That was the image. But the militarists said, no, that's silly. The militarists are also called the legalists. But they said, no, it's military power that will unify. Well, military power did unify. Qin Shi Huangdi founded the Qing dynasty, but how long did it last? Only his lifetime. And as soon as he died, it fell. And who took over? A bunch of Confucianists. And that's how Confucianism got started. And they founded the Han dynasty. And the Han dynasty lasted for 400 years. You see? So Confucius was right. It is righteousness that will prevail in the long run. And that's what people said when they studied and learned here, that righteousness and goodness is the key to ruling, okay?
That sounds like truth.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
Sounds like something I would teach.
And that's why I like Confucianism. There are some aspects of Confucianism I don't like. I like Buddhism. There's some aspects of Buddhism I don't like. But the core of it is really good stuff. It's really good stuff. And so it's good for us to come here to learn. Okay? Now, we'll talk about the 3 bonds and the 5 relationships in a little more detail later on. But let me just say this, though. When you talk about the 3 bonds, you just say that's the 3 bonds. But when you talk about the 5 relationships, you define each one. Okay? Between the king and the subject, there is something. What is it? You would think loyalty. And loyalty is an important subject that is going to come up later on. And it is a key subject in Confucianism. But when Chu Shi talked about the 5 relationships, he said between king and subject there is
love,
righteousness. Righteousness. No, not fear. That's the opposite idea. But righteousness. The king behaves righteously and the people behave righteously. And what does righteous mean? In our Mormon argot, you know the word argot? Mm-hmm. Lingo. In our argot, righteousness means one thing, but when you say righteousness in Confucianism, it tends to mean being right, doing the right thing, being just. Yeah, and so that's how the king and the people should interact with each other.
So what if like you have a wicked king or someone, a king who's not righteous? How does that affect?
I'm glad you asked.
Then the people have the right
Did you
to
overhear
rebel.
me talking to our guide as we were leaving the Chongmyo?
I didn't recognize it.
I asked her. Oh, you were playing with pigeons. Okay. Okay. Just so I know where we all are. That's good. What level are we operating at here? Okay.
Down here.
Yeah. Okay. Now, when we were walking out, I asked her. I said, "I'm sorry we got here late, but did you tell them about the 2 kings that were not enshrined?" And she said, "No, I didn't tell them about that. There were 2 kings of the 27 kings of the Chosun dynasty. 2 were never put in the Chongmyo. 2 were never given what we call temple names, or that honorific name of Zhou or Zhong. Notice how all the kings are something Zhou, something Zhou, something Zhong. There's Sejong. His son was Sejou. Ted Zhou was the founder. Ted Zhong was his son, Zhou and Zhong. There are 2 kings who are known through history forever after only by their princely titles. Their prince title is Gun. There's Yansan Gun and Kwanghe Gun. And these 2 kings ruled for, 15, 18 years, each of them, and they were deposed, which means the Confucian scholars in the bureaucracy and the government got together and kicked them out. And it was a hard thing to do. There were a couple other kings that should have been deposed, but it's just a hard thing to do. There were some kings that died natural deaths at age 24. You know how she talked about
hemlock help?
Yeah, a little hemlock help. That's what natural death means. Notice he said there were some kings that died after